Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Ayin Vov Amud Beis, starting with Ayin Vov Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the bottom. Our Mishnah is discussing 2 chatzeros side by side with a mechitza in between them. If the mechitza has a chaloin, an opening of at least dalid al dalid tfochim, that is within asara tfochim of the ground, then it will enable the 2 chatzeros to make an erev chatzeros with each other. However, if it's missing that dimension, less than 3 by 3 tfochim, it doesn't have chashivus, or it's above asara tfochim from the ground, then only each chatzer will be able to make an erev chatzeros independently. What happens when the chaloin is not a square chalon of dalid al dalid, but rather it's a circle? What is dimensions of that circle? Says the Gemara, Om Rabbi Yochanan, chaloin agol tzorich sheyeh behekefoi esrim ve'arbo tfochim. Rabbi Yochanan says it must be a circle of a circumference of 24 tfochim. V'shnayim umashu mehem b'toich asara, and 2 and a little bit more of those tfachim must be within asar tfachim of the ground. She'im yirabenu nimtza mashu b'toich yud, that if you will then put a square inside of this circle, you'll have a little bit of the square within asar tfachim of the ground. So Rabbi Yochanan requires that the circle chaloin must be 24 tfachim in its circumference. Ask the Gemara, Michti, let us see. Kol sheyesh behekefoi shloisha tfachim, yesh boi barachvoi tefach. We have a rule that when there is a circumference of 3 tfachim, of a circle, the roichav, that means the diameter, is going to be 1 tefach. So if you have over here a requirement of dalid al dalid tfachim in its square, so that means the diameter is 4 tfachim. 3 times that, or a little bit more than 3 times that, would be 12. Says the Gemara, betray sarsagya, and therefore 12 tfachim should be sufficient to make a circumference of a circle, not 24 like Rabbi Yochanan said. We're on top of Ayin Vov Amud Beis. The Gemara says, Hani mili. When is this true that we say that indeed the circumference is going to be 3 times the diameter, is going to be igula? That's going to be when it comes to the igul, when it comes to the circle. Aval b'ribua bo'inon tfei, we require more. If you're going to have the square, then it's going to be more, because when it comes to the diameter of a circle, so that rounds itself off. It arches in both directions, the top and on the bottom. Whereas the square needs to go across, so the diameter of the square is certainly going to be bigger than that of the circle. So ask the Gemara, Michti, still, let us see. Kama miruba yeser al ha'igol. What is the greater amount of the square than the circle? Rivia. It's only a rivia. That means a quarter of the square. And therefore, b'shitzar sagya. If you had 16, and then, like we said before, that would be a quarter of that, which is 4. So 4 from the 12 that we said before, if you added that, you'd get 16. So you'd only have 16 and not 24, like Rabbi Yochanan suggested. The Gemara says, no, hani mili, when is this true? Igulo the nofik migoy rivua. That is when you have the circle inside of the square. Aval ribua ninofik migoy igulo boinin tfei. But when you have the square inside of the circle, then you need more. My taima, what's the reason? Mishum morsha de karnoso. Because of the area, when you have a square inside a circle, there's going to be areas outside of the square that need to be accounted for. Michti, ask the Gemara, let's see, still, kol amta b'ribuav, amta v'trei chumshe balachsoina. We have a principle that for every amma of the side of a square, So then it's an amma and 2/3 for the diagonal. So over here would come out that we're talking about a 4x4 tfachim square. So that means that 4 times 1 2/3 gives us 8/3, which means 1 2/3. 1 2/3 plus the 4 gives us 5 2/3. So it comes out Beshiv Sar Niki Chum Shosagya. If you then take 3 times, we said 3 times is greater than the circumference, then 3 times 5 2/3 gets us to 15 2/3. Sorry, 15 and 3 times 5 3/5 gives us 15 and 9/5, which comes out to be 16 4/5. Oh, so that's what the Gemara is saying over here. B'shiv sar niki chum shesagya, a little bit less than 17, which comes out to be 16 4/5, not the 24 that Rabbi Yochanan suggested. So Gemara accepts this calculation and says, where does Rabbi Yochanan get his 24 from? First, it states the first part of Rabbi Yochanan's statement. Rabbi Yochanan Omar ki daini de Kesari, the judges of Kesar, v'amreid ki rabbanan de Kesar, or the rabbanan, they said of Kesar, the amre, they said igula migoy rivua riva. This is a statement that we mentioned before. That has nothing to do with the 24 that he had mentioned. It's igula migoy rivua. When a circle inside is inside the square, then riva, then we said that indeed it's going to be a quarter more than the circle of the quarter more of the square greater than the circle. Okay, so now what's relevant to us is their statement, the latter statement, rivua migoy igula. When you have a square that is inside a circle, then it's palga. So here, that's where Rabbi Yochanan gets his 24. Because after all, if you say 4x4 tfachim is the square that we're talking about, so then it comes out to be that's 16. So if you have he says each one is 1.5. So then if you take 1.5 of 16, that comes out to be another 8, whereby you get the 24. So it comes out that Rabbi Yochanan understood from the words of the Dayani de Kesari or the Rabbanan de Kesari that this is the amount over here. But the way it's explained is that he was just saying this in order to then show that you have to have much more than the Dalit al Dalit. He was giving an exaggerated amount that the circle has to be in order to then suffice. It would be obvious that this is going to be satisfactory. The Gemara now quotes the Mishnah. The Mishnah had stated that, again, if you have a chaloin that is less than Dalit al Dalit tfachim, or it is is greater than 10 tfachim high, then that chalon will not allow the 2 chatzeros to enjoin and to make an erev chatzeros and to be able to carry one to the other. Says the Gemara, Pochois midalit al dalit v'chulei. Omar Rav Nachman, Lo shonu el chaloin shebein beis chatzeros. That which it states in the Mishnah is talking about specifically that the chaloin is on a mechitza between 2 chatzeros. Aval chaloin shebein beis batim afilu mala me asora nami. Even if it's going to be higher than asar tfachim, still it'll be satisfactory if it's going to be between 2 batim. 2 batim can be enjoined in erev chatzeros, even if the chalon is higher than asar tfachim. And therefore, imrotz la'ari ma'arvin echad, they can go and join into one erev chatzeros. Ask them on my time, what's the difference between the chiluk? What is the chiluk between chatzeros and batim? Says the Gemara, beisa keman demali dami. When it comes to chatzeros, so it says chatzeros, if it's higher, the chalon is higher than asar tfachim, then the access to the chaloin is not going to be comfortable and convenient, whereby it will not enable the 2 chatzeros to enjoin. But if it's in a bias, here the Gemara says a svara. It says it's a bias that's keman de mali dami. It's as if it's a that's filled up. It's filled up with tables, with chairs, with beds, and therefore a person can stand up easily and have access to a window that is going to be higher than asar tfachim. And therefore, if chalon is higher than asar tefachim, then you can still go ahead and combine the two batim together with erev chatzeros. Eisvei Rava Rav Nachman. Rava asked on Rav Nachman from the following brayso: Echad li chaloin shebein beis chatzeros. Echad li chalon shebein beis batim. Echad li chalon shebein beis aliyos, between two different aliyos, attics. Ve'echad li chalon shebein beis gagim, or between two roofs. Ve'echad li chalon shebein beis chadorim, two rooms that are owned by two different people. Kulon dali al dali b'toich asara. All of them, here it states in the Brisa, require that be dal al dal tefachim, and within asar tefachim, and included in this list is between two batim. So Kasha and Rav Nachman answers Rav Nachman targuma achatzeros. You can explain this Brisa by saying that it's going on achatzeros. When it says that it has to be within asar tefachim, it's talking about chatzeros, not the batim. Ask the Gemara, but still, v'ha echol li ketoni, it says echol li, meaning to say that it's including in all of them. He doesn't have a distinction between one or the other. They're all equal. Answers the Gemara, Targuma, Rav Nachman says, you have to explain it, al dalid, on that which it says at the end of the verse, going on the words al dalid tefachim, on that aspect of the requirements of the chaloin. That's what it's talking about. Then it makes it no difference. They're all equal, and therefore, whether it's going to be echali ve'echali, they're all going to then be the same in regards to requiring dalid al dalid. But in regards to asar tefachim, no. When it comes to a bias, you can even have higher than asar tefachim. Ask the Gemara, boy minei Ravi Abba bin Rav Nachman. Rabbi Abba now asks Rav Nachman the following question: Lul hapasuach min habayis laliyah. If you have a bias, a house, and an aliyah, an attic, that means the access to the attic is on the bottom of the attic. There is a floor that is like a window that one can go from the bias up into the aliyah, into the attic. So that is higher than asar tefachim. We're talking about where it's owned by two different people. So over here, is that going to allow them to go ahead and combine in erev chatzeros between the two, between the bias and the aliyah? Tzorich sulam kavua la'atiroi, or ein tzorich sulam kavua la'atiro. We learned earlier, the Gemara had stated that Rav says that b'taras Pesach, when it comes to a sulam, it's going to have taras Pesach, and therefore it states over there, the Gemara in Daf Nun Tes Amud Beis, when you have a sulam that is going to be between two chatzeros, even if you don't have a Pesach between two chatzeros, the sulam will then enable you to then make an erev chatzeros between the two chatzeros, because it's as if it's a Pesach when you have a sulam. So here it's asking, when you have the lul ha-pesuach bin ha-bayis la'aliyah, do you need a sulam kavua in order to then make a erev chatzeros between the two? Or you ain't sorich sulam kavua la'atiro, you do not need a sulam kavua between the bayis and the aliyah, and you can still go ahead and make erev chatzeros between the two of them. So what's the shayla? Ki amrin, do we say beiso kiman de malidami, that a bias is like it is filled up? Hani mili, when is that so? Min hatzad ava be'emtzaloi. That's true that we explained before. The svara is when it's on the side. When you have a chalon on the side, then even if it's higher than asar tefachim, so you go ahead and you put a table or a chair or a bed and you step on it, and you have access, a convenient access to the chalon. But that's when it's on the side, that's when it's on the wall, on the side. But if it's in the middle, then we don't say you have convenient access. And therefore, it would not be valid to go ahead and make erev chatzeros with that type of chalon. Oi, dil maloi shna, perhaps there's no difference. What's another svar to explain this concept of keman de mali dami? A bias is like as if halachically it is filled up. Here there's another svara. Rashi says in the Gemara Shabbos Daf Hey Amud Aleph, I'll quote you his words. Rashi states that keman de mali dami is davar sosum mikol tzad. We look at it halachically as if the entire area of the bayis, which is roofed, is closed entirely. Kemoloi chafetzim ad gagoy, as if it's filled up with all types of objects. De'ein avir choshuv avir, which case we don't even consider to be an airspace. Therefore, we're not even able to then ascertain the height, whether it's asar tvachim or not. Therefore, when it comes to a bayis ve'aliyah, granted it's physically higher than Asar Tfachim, the entrance to the Aliyah, but the Svara says that over here it's as if the entire area is filled up, whereby we don't say there's a requirement of dafka less than Asar Tfachim. Even if it's more than Asar Tfachim, it makes no difference in regards to the bias and the Aliyah. And therefore, Lo Shna. Omar Le, Rav Nachman answers, Eino tzorich. You do not need a sulam kavua. You can still make an erev chatzeiros between the bias and the aliyah, because we have the svar over here to say it's kaman the mali dami. Sover mine sulam kavua hu deino tzorich. Rabbi Abba, who asked the question to Rav Nachman, he thought that Rav Nachman meant to say that you don't need a sulam kavua throughout the entire week, but hasulam aray sorry. But during the hemshech of Shabbos, you would need a sulam. On that, the Gemara says, Itmar Amar Rav Yosef bar Yirmiyahu Amar Rav Nachman, in the name of Rav Nachman, Echad sulam kavua, vechad sulam aray eino tzorich. You don't need any type of sulam, even if a sulam to be there just for Shabbos. Even without the sulam, it's sufficient to go ahead and make an erev chatzeiros between the bayis and the aliyah.